I've been working fairly closely with BYU scholars now for about 4 or 5 years, and I've had the structure shared with me that it's probably about 80% of the scholars are research-based. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Mm-hmm. I think
in the religious ed, you mean?
Yeah. And then about 13% are more the teaching scholars who they're not under the gauntlet of publish or perish. They've got to teach, and then there's professionals who come into the faculty.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe they don't have a PhD, but they had 15, 20 years out in the workforce, and those together, they're a very different mindset of those three types of people.
Amen.
And what's sort of the mandate that you're under? I mean, you're on the research side.
I'm a research scholar.
So describe a day in your life and what your mission is over the next year or so in research. What are you being asked to do?
To publish.
To publish.
Maybe that's the simplest way
What
to
does
put
that
it.
mean? Yeah.
I mean,
because we got a lot of young people saying, "I want to be a scholar."
Yeah.
How would you mentor them?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. I mean, I have two kinds of conversations with young people who want to become scholars.
Okay.
I would say in 90% of the cases, I say, run for your life. Right?
Tell me why. Why do you say
because if they want to do it for a living, the job market is disastrous.
Interesting.
It's just utterly disastrous.
It's getting tougher and tougher all the time.
So when I finished my degree, for instance, in philosophy, and in my subfield of philosophy, there were 7 jobs the year I graduated and 700 people on the market.
Oh my heavens.
So
we're talking on a national basis?
Yeah.
Wow.
So you're in a situation
where...
That
says a lot about you, by the way, of being able to
that
grab
I landed
one
a job,
of them.
or that luck is a real thing. Yeah, I mean, it's a brutal job market. So I mean, it's like trying to make it into the NBA or something, right?
Wow.
You have got to compete at that level. So if you want to be a scholar as a real paid job, that this is what you do, I mean, you've got to be the best of the best.
Gotcha.
You've got to be willing to compete at the highest level. And what that means is publishing in very respectable venues and being able to...
How often do you need to publish?
It depends on where you land.
Okay.
Roughly.
Just...
Yeah. I mean...
well, let's say BYU. What is it?
Yeah, so in our college, the expectation is a 1 peer-reviewed publication a year.
Okay.
Right.
So that's a real quality, forceful work project to make that happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it depends. If you land at a job at an Ivy League school, it's going to be higher. If you land at a place where there's a higher emphasis on teaching than on scholarship, then it's going to be lower. So it varies. But yeah, that's the expectation in religious ed. So yeah, you've got to be working constantly.
Gotcha.
And that's a minimal bar, right? So it's not like you do your 1 for the year and you can sit
and this
back.
is not easy. I mean, they're all telling me the same kind of thing, that as a Latter-day Saint with a faith background, a God-centric background, when you publish in those journals, that doesn't really go. You're not allowed to go into that world all that much and still get it past your peers.
It's complicated. I'm less pessimistic than many, maybe.
Okay.
I think there's definitely you could call it a kind of secular bias, if you will, or something like that, right? There's no question. That's a reality.
Okay.
But there's space within the secular world for religion.
Yeah.
There really is.
Well, you said some of those evangelists are doing pretty good with their one Isaiah.
Especially in the field of biblical scholarship. There are many, many, many people working in biblical scholarship who are religious, deeply committed.
Got it.
And so, yeah, it's not a field that's just filled with like angry flag-bearing secularists who are trying to get rid of God. That's not the picture at all.
Yeah.
When you write for that audience, you write without your faith commitments as much as possible in a certain sense. But no one's afraid of you stating your faith commitments as long as you make clear what they are and why they might be shaping your argument. Right? It's something like if you write a journal article on some drug you're developing or something like that, you have to state up front, here are the people that funded me, right? Because then people know how that might
the background.
sway.
Yeah, the thesis, the things that might have skewed potentially.
Exactly. And so in some sense, you just do this in the world of biblical studies as well. You might say, I'm reading this as a Mormon.
Yeah. And
there's space for that in the world of scholarship. So you have to be careful. You have to know how to talk the right way. You have to be able to communicate well. You have to not be dogmatic about positions.
Yeah.
You can't come in and say, everyone's stupid because they don't see what the restoration has revealed. You're not going to get published.
Yeah.
But you can go in and say, writing as a Latter-day Saint, here's how I see this. People will give you a spot at the table.
Gotcha.
So I'm less pessimistic about it than some people are. Yeah, but it's a complex field to maneuver. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I get a lot of feedback from a lot of directions that it's challenging.
Yeah,
Very
it's challenging,
challenging,
but it's not as challenging as I think it's sometimes made out to be.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got a pretty cool book here.
I like
It's called
it.
The Vision of All. Now, in the print version, you've got 25 lectures in the paperback, but in the Kindle, it's split into two.
Oh, is it? I see. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's got half of it in one, half in the other.
Okay.
Pretty handy I love it in the Kindle version. Tell us about what was the background of this?
Yeah.
It's 25 lectures of Isaiah in Nephi's record.
Yeah, very
talk to us about that
specific.
for a minute.
Yeah, so the current book project I'm working on, the big Isaiah book, is what led me to write this one. So I began writing the big Isaiah book maybe 5-6 years ago now. Began gathering data, doing research. Some of it is not recycling, but developing some of my earlier things I've said on Isaiah. But there was a certain point at which in my research I had so much floating in my head.
Yeah.
I'd worked through every variant of Isaiah and written up, I've got 200 pages of notes I've written up on all the variants on Isaiah. I'd gone through, stacks and stacks of literature on Isaiah scholarship and on theological interpretation and everything I could read by Latter-day Saints on Isaiah. And I just had all this stuff in my head and I needed to get it out and organize it, right? So I began doing various projects to kind of organize this. I wrote up literature reviews and just posted them on a blog somewhere and blah, 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 blah. But in order to sort of sort through all the thoughts I had developed about what Isaiah is doing specifically in the Book of Mormon, I began to think, what if I wrote a kind of popular book? And that's how this came about, right? So at the time I had developed a style of writing for when I'm just going to present. When I first began as a scholar, when
like
I wrote,
a lecture kind of thing. Yeah.
When I first began as a scholar, I was only writing for written, published stuff, and so even when I went and gave a paper, it was a very scholarly, kind of dry, no one knows what I'm talking about kind of thing. But at some point I realized if I'm giving a paper and it's just for presentation, there's no reason to do that. So I began writing and trying to figure out how to write very fluid, very chatty papers that work better in a delivery context. And so I felt like I had gained the right voice there, and I thought, well, what if I did something like that with all this stuff floating in my head? I could get a lot of things kind of worked out, sort things out.
And that's a different approach than your first couple of books. They were
Definitely
to the scholarly audience. This is more of a free flow lecture format, in more of a, like you've mentioned, a populist kind of approach.
Yeah, no footnotes. There's a further reading
even
thing at the back.
the voices if you're in a lecture.
Yep, and I've never given these in a kind of public lecture sense.
Well, you fooled us. We thought we were just listening to a recording of some 25 great lectures.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
Well, it worked.
And I will say I've had people criticize me for it a bit,
Really?
right? Yeah, some
Really?
people stop telling me, oh, we're running out of time. I know you're not giving these, right?
Yeah.
But I wanted it to feel like my classroom. And what I aimed for really strictly was, how do I sound when I teach in my classroom? Because there my students can follow, I hope, what I'm doing, right?
Sure.
Where they might have a hard time reading my scholarly work. So I wrote it like I was going to give the lecture in a chatty way. And nonetheless, I hope, if you've read it, it's nonetheless very academic.
Oh, yes.
The content is heavy and so on, but I'm trying to deliver it in this down to earth.
More digestible.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's doing pretty well.
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, that's fun.
I'm happy with it.
Well, good. Well, we have been so excited to have you give us more insights into especially into the Nephi journey concept. We just love that. And I hope it's okay. We may come back at you and see if you're willing to actually take us in and help us in almost a real world workshop and study a few things and see if we can come at it that way.
Sure.
Thanks for joining us today.
Of course.
Thanks, everybody.